Welcome to the Breadwinner Podcast. This is the show for sourdough microbakery owners who are building or dreaming of building a business that is thriving, profitable, sustainable, and doesn't burn you out. If that sounds like you or what you're dreaming of, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Caroline Bauer. I own a successful in-home sourdough microbakery. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about how to wisely invest in equipment to scale your business. So whether you're just starting out or looking to take your sourdough microbakery to the next level, making smart equipment choices can make all the difference. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive in. Before we get started, I'll let you know down in the show notes is a link to a free download to a guide and checklist if you are just getting started. This guide will show you everything that you need to know before you can sell your first loaf of bread. So jump down to the show notes and grab that if it sounds helpful. All right, scaling your business. It's exciting, but it can be so daunting. And as you grow, you will likely find that you are running into bottlenecks that are slowing you down, and they are probably related to things like fridge space, oven capacity, storage space, manual processes, all things that can be alleviated with investing in equipment, but equipment investments can be expensive. So today I'll walk you through a step-by-step process to ensure you're making the best choices for your unique business. Step 1 is to assess your needs. You might want to grab a pen and paper to write these questions down to help give you a format to help you as you're planning. But the first thing to ask yourself is, where are your production bottlenecks? So where are the areas that everything's piling up and slowing you down? How much additional volume do you want or need to produce? For example, are you stuck at 12 loaves per bake day and you want to double that? Next, you'll ask, what is your budget? Realistically, at your current capacity, what can you afford to invest?
I'm going to add a really quick interjection so the sound will sound a little bit different for a moment because I'm using a different microphone. So bear with me and the sound quality will get back to normal in a second.
The other side of budgeting to consider is how much can you afford not to invest? For example, if your capacity is limited by your oven, but you could double your capacity by investing in a different oven or supplies to bake more at a time, how quickly could you make that money back? Another example would be a mixer. If you are mixing by hand and it's taking you many hours and limiting your capacity, if you were to invest the money in a larger mixer and that would save you time and allow you to increase your capacity, how quickly could you sell enough product to earn back the money that you invested in that mixer? And then next, ask yourself, how much space do you have? If you're bringing in a new piece of equipment like a mixer, a refrigerator, or an oven, do you have space to put that? And if not, do you have a way to rearrange or creatively find some space? So take some time to think through this, write down your answers. This clarity will help you focus on what you really need, not just what looks cool or what you see other bakers buying. Step 2 is to prioritize your purchases. So not all equipment is created equal, and you don't need everything right away. So here's a list of the primary equipment that most bakers invest in as they begin to grow. And the order of priority is a little bit subjective, but I'll share what I have observed and what I've seen other people agree with. So the 3 primary bottleneck and pieces of equipment that bakers typically invest in as they're growing are a refrigerator, a mixer, and an oven. Many people will tell you the order should be refrigerator, oven, mixer, or refrigerator, mixer, oven. That's up to you. They do kind of go in those 3s. You can mix by hand if your body supports that, But if you can mix more dough than you can hold in your fridge, then you're still running into a bottleneck. So I would recommend considering first investing in a dedicated fridge or freezer situation to hold your proofing dough. That way it can hang out there and you can put as much as your refrigerator will hold. You're only limited by the capacity of your fridge at this point. You do not have to buy a brand new or a super expensive refrigerator. There are some Scrappy options. I went with the Scrappy option. I bought a $250 upright freezer off of Facebook Marketplace. I found a large one. I think the capacity is probably around 21 cubic feet. And I can proof about 80 loaves in bannetons in there. It is a freezer, so I use an Inkbird temperature controller to run it as a refrigerator. Basically, the freezer gets plugged into the temperature controller and I can set my temperature on the actual Inkbird device. The device is plugged into the wall. The device measures the internal temperature of the fridge. And as soon as it exceeds my set temperature, for example, if I have it set at 36 degrees Fahrenheit, as soon as Inkbird detects that the temperature of the fridge has gone above 36 degrees, it kicks on the cooling mechanism of the freezer itself and turns it on until it drops the temperature to where it needs to be, and then it kicks off again. So it's pretty energy efficient as the freezer is only running for a few minutes at a time to maintain my set temperature, and it maintains the temperature that I need it at. I can also switch it over to freezer mode. So if I load a bunch of dough in there, I can bump the temperature of the freezer way down to quickly lower the temperature of my dough so I don't risk it all overproofing in the refrigerator. And then I just bump the temperature back up to a normal fridge temperature. How many times can I say temperature in one sentence? And then let it stay in there to cold proof as long as I need it to. Moving on to commercial mixers. After the fridge, I invested in a mixer. I chose to do that because I felt like mixing my dough by hand was a major production bottleneck. It was slowing me down. My days were not nearly as efficient. I could not mix as much as I wanted to. My cleanup time was crazy. And so having a mixer where I can mix 20 or 25 loaves at a time rather than manually by hand mixing 6 or 8 or 10 has been a big game changer for me. If you don't mind mixing by hand, you can hold off on this investment. It's just one to have on your radar to consider. And then finally, an oven is a pretty crucial investment as you're growing a microbakery, especially if you're starting out with just your residential home oven. There are really efficient, specifically dedicated bread ovens that are made for a residential setting. Common ones are the Simply Bread oven, the Rackmaster 2020, the Rofco B40. There are a few other ones, all super excellent pieces of equipment, but there are Scrappy options too. So I have made the decision to hold off on an expensive bread oven and start with the Scrappy oven option. And so again, I went over to Facebook Marketplace and I found a $250 older double oven, the type that's meant to be built into wall cabinetry. It was an older model, but it still worked fine. And so I invested in the electrician to wire the proper outlet for me. In using that oven, doubled my capacity because I was no longer limited to 4 loaves at a time on the baking steel in my home oven. I could now do 4 loaves per oven, so a total of 8 at a time. This was a super helpful investment because it immediately improved my sleep quality. I was getting so much more sleep. And I could bake more at a time in a little bit less time. So I was able to offer more product at markets and offer more product to my porch pickups, thus boosting my revenue. After a few months with that Facebook Marketplace oven, I did decide to invest in a brand new double oven. I stuck with the double oven, but after a lot of research, I landed on a different brand new model that is a lot more efficient. With my original older model, I tried baking 2 trays of bread, so 8 loaves at a time. And that oven just was not efficient enough to do that. The heat distribution was very off, so I would end up burning a lot of bread. With this new oven, I can bake 4 loaves per steel with 2 steels per oven, meaning I can do 16 loaves at a time. For me, that is super efficient. It has cut down tremendously on the amount of time I spend baking, and I'm happy to stay with this for a while. I am allocating money for a bread oven because the efficiency of that certainly will pay off in the energy savings and just not having to shuffle the loaves around and deal with steam. But for now, this option is about a third to a quarter of the price of a bread oven, and I'm super happy to stick with this double wall oven for a little while. I just have it freestanding in the room adjacent to my kitchen. It's raised off the floor a few inches on a wood pallet, and it works wonderfully. Now, if investing in an actual bread oven makes sense for your business, definitely go for it. Like I mentioned, they exist for a reason. They're more efficient. They distribute the heat really well. Some of them have built-in steam injection, and so they will save you so much time in the long run. But just know that if you are stuck baking just a few loaves at a time in your home oven, there are other options that you can consider. Another bottleneck is storage solution. This is a lower investment, so something that maybe you can consider earlier on, but this can look like shelving, ingredient bin, cooling rats. So I have found that as my production increases, I need to add additional storage, specifically cooling rats, a little bit at a time to make sure that I am keeping up with my production. So again, just go back to your initial questions and start with the equipment that will have the biggest impact on your current workflow and production capacity. Likely that'll be a fridge first, followed by an oven or a mixer, and you'll probably eventually land on those 3 big equipment investments. And then down the road, you can look at things like a dough sheeter, a proofing box, or a speed rag, things like that also increase production and efficiency, but can wait a little bit longer depending on the priorities of your business. If you've identified the equipment that you need, you'll move over into the research stage. We've talked a little bit about this, but there is so much information online. Some super helpful comparisons if you go into some of the Sourdough Microbakery Facebook groups and search bread ovens, you'll see some comparisons and a lot of people weighing in with their opinions. That can help you narrow down which bread oven you may choose if you're investing that route. Look for reviews and testimonials. Don't just go with whatever you see the big bakers on Instagram using just because it's a trendy thing, but make sure to make the decision that makes the most sense for your family. As we touched on, consider used equipment too if it makes sense or if it's available. There are some great options. That was what really allowed me to increase the capacity of my bakery. If I had been limiting myself to brand new equipment, such as the fridge or the oven, I would have been stuck for a much longer time as I saved up the money. But going the used route for my fridge and then my oven allowed me to take that leap much sooner. I found both of those on Facebook Marketplace, but you could also look places like Craigslist or the OfferUp app to find equipment local to you. It's a good idea to check it out in person if you can before you get it all the way home. We bought a double oven and it had been outside. And the day that we picked it up, it was drizzling and rainy. So my husband got it all the way home. We brought it all the way inside, got it plugged in, and found that the control panel was completely shorting out. And so we brought it all the way back to the place where we bought it and got the money back. So if you know a little bit about the maintenance records or pay attention to how it's being stored before you bring it on home, that might be a good idea. If you are buying used, don't be afraid to ask for flexibility in the price. Unless they specifically say that the price is firm, a lot of people who are selling on a platform like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist build in some price flexibility. So you could offer a little bit lower price and say you're ready to pick it up and you have cash in hand. Maybe even bring a loaf of freshly baked bread and see if they have some flexibility. Once you have some larger equipment in your home, it's important to consider maintenance as well as insurance. Now, I'm not an expert in insurance, so do your own research here. But you may want to set aside a small allocation of money little by little, just in case something happens so that it doesn't blindside you or wipe you out if you find that you run into unexpected expenses. As we wind down this episode, let's talk a little bit about financing. So this is a completely personal decision. Some bakers choose to finance their equipment. Some of the bread ovens do have financing options. And so for many bakers, that allows them to get it in their home and get them baking sooner so they can pay off that financing quickly. Others choose to bootstrap and pay it all in cash at once. That's the route I'm choosing to go, but it's completely up to you and what makes sense for your own situation. Like I mentioned, some of the bread ovens themselves have their own financing options. I am not a financing expert, so I'm not going to give a ton of advice here, but know that there are some options available, including loans or even grants. Some areas have small business grants that could be available. You can ask at your local chamber of commerce and see if they have any insight into this for you. But know that if you are growing slow, that is okay too. The final thing to consider as you are investing in equipment is planning out your space. So before you bring in your new equipment, make sure that you have a plan for where you're going to put it. Make sure your workflow makes sense and there's enough room for everything, enough space for the oven door to open and let you maneuver to get your products in and out. Make sure that your flooring is easy to clean and you have limited clutter to minimize any sort of safety hazards or inefficiencies. All right, that wraps up today's episode on how to wisely invest in equipment to scale your business. Remember, the key is to assess your needs, prioritize your purchases, and do thorough research. Don't rush into decisions. Don't just buy what other people are using on Instagram. Take your time to find the right equipment, and it will help you grow in a sustainable way so you are here for the long haul. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, if you are just getting started, I do have a free guide linked in the show notes with a checklist and a guide to help you start a brand new business off on a solid foundation. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe to the show so you don't miss any future episodes. I drop episodes every Monday and Thursday. If you're enjoying the show, leave a review so other people can find the show too. I would love to hear your thoughts and any topics you might want me to discuss in the future. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at CarolineBauer_sourdough. If you screenshot the show and tag me, it would make my day to see where you're listening from. I am so glad and so honored that you have spent some time out of your day with me today. Until next time, happy baking.